Written in the late 16th century, De Arcana Mortis, on the mysteries of death, is a treatise exploring the nature of the soul, the transition beyond death, and the entities that dwell in the liminal spaces between life and oblivion. Among the many grimoires and forbidden texts whispered about in the halls of occult study, few are as enigmatic as this work. Its author, known only as Frater Aurelius, was said to have been a Dominican inquisitor before his sudden disappearance. Some accounts suggest he was burned as a heretic, while others claim he fled to the east in search of deeper knowledge. The book itself was condemned by the Church, its copies burned in the fires of the Inquisition. Yet despite this decree, rumors persist of its survival, locked away in the vaults of secretive collectors or hidden in monastic libraries known only to the initiated. Occultists of later centuries, including figures associated with the Ordo, Templi Orientis and the Order of the Black Sun, are said to have possessed fragments of its teachings. Drawing upon Neoplatonic philosophy, alchemical mysticism, and heretical Gnostic doctrines, De Arcana Mortis weaves together a vision of the afterlife that contradicts Orthodox Christian teachings. More troubling, some have noted disturbing parallels between its descriptions and the blasphemous revelations found in the Necronomicon and Timeline Secrets. Whether Frater Aurelius was an early prophet of forbidden truths or merely a madman lost in the labyrinth of his own mind remains a mystery. Chapter 1. The Nature of the Soul. Frater Aurelius begins his work by challenging the prevailing theological view of the soul as a singular and immutable essence. Instead, he argues that the soul is a composite entity, shaped by different cosmic forces, each exerting its own influence over the fate of the departed. According to his writings, the Anima Corporalis, or corporeal spirit, binds the soul to the flesh, anchoring it to the physical world until death severs the connection. Upon this severance, the Anima Aetheris, the ethereal soul, begins its ascent beyond the mortal plane. However, Aurelius warns that not all souls complete this passage. Some are ensnared in the liminal void, unable or unwilling to move beyond. The most unsettling aspect of his theory concerns the umbra tenebrarum, the shadow soul, which lingers in places of death and is drawn to the living, feeding on memory and emotion as it seeks a semblance of existence. The breath of life is but a flickering lamp, and when it is extinguished, the shadow it casts may yet walk in darkness. This passage suggests a belief that the soul does not simply transition into a higher state of being, but can persist in fragmented forms, contradicting the Church's teachings of a singular and unified soul. Some scholars argue that these ideas prefigure later occult theories of spectral hauntings and astral remnants, implying that death is not an end, but a scattering. Chapter 2. The Journey Beyond the Veil. The second chapter describes the process of death and what awaits beyond. Here, Frater Aurelius introduces the concept of the Gate of the Pale King, a threshold through which all must pass. He speaks of an intermediary realm where souls linger, awaiting judgment, not from a divine authority, but from forces beyond mortal comprehension. Some readers have noted unsettling parallels between this account and descriptions found in ancient Egyptian funerary texts, as well as later references in the Necronomicon regarding the lurkers at the threshold. Aurelius further expands upon the fate of those who stand at the gate, suggesting that not all souls pass through unscathed. Some, he warns, are drawn towards strange, luminous corridors, where they are judged by unseen entities that do not recognize human notions of morality. Others find themselves lost in the abyssal reaches of the void, unable to return, yet denied entry beyond. He cryptically mentions the keepers of the pale fire, beings that guard the gate and sift through the dead, deciding which souls may pass and which must remain. These figures bear a disturbing resemblance to the watchers at the threshold referenced in later occult traditions, sentinels who stand between the realms of the living and the dead, answering to no earthly god. As the body decays, the spirit wavers at the threshold, drawn by forces unseen, some to light, others to the abyss. This passage implies that not all who pass through the gate find peace. Some are ensnared, pulled into nameless horrors beyond mortal reckoning. Chapter 3. The Lurkers in the Between. This chapter is among the most feared and debated sections of the Arcana Mortis. It speaks of entities that exist between life and death, beings that feed upon the essence of wandering souls. Some passages suggest these entities are not mere demons in the Christian sense, but older primordial beings that have existed since time immemorial. Certain scholars have compared these descriptions to the old ones, particularly Nyarlathotep, known in forbidden circles as the Faceless Messenger. The text speaks of shadowy figures that whisper to the dying, leading them away from salvation into eternal servitude. Some accounts imply that these entities do not simply consume souls, but reshape them, molding their essence into forms more suited for existence beyond the veil. A particularly chilling passage suggests that those who linger too long at the threshold risk being claimed by these entities, becoming little more than echoes trapped in the abyss. Aurelius describes a fate worse than death: souls stripped of their will, condemned to roam unseen, speaking only in stolen voices. He warns that these beings sometimes appear in the world of the living as flickering shadows at the edges of candlelight, drawn to those nearing their final breath. There are those who tarry in the twilight realm, neither living nor truly dead, whose whispering fingers seek the warmth of mortal breath. Chapter 4. The Dead Who Do Not Sleep. This chapter explores the idea of restless souls and revenants, spirits, unable to move beyond death due to powerful emotions, unresolved oaths, or necromantic interference. Frater Aurelius warns that improper burial rites may leave the dead bound to this realm, much like the specters of classical antiquity. He recounts tales of those who refuse to acknowledge death, their very will defying the grave. Aurelius describes 3 distinct types of these lingering dead. Some are mere echoes, repeating their final moments in an endless cycle, unaware of the world around them. Others, driven by vengeance or despair, roam in search of the living, drawn to those who disturb their rest. But the most feared are those reawakened by dark rites, bound in servitude to sorcerers who wield forgotten necromantic arts. The text hints at rituals that could sever these souls from their torment, but also warns that summoning them comes at a terrible price. Some scholars have drawn comparisons between this chapter and the Timeline Secrets, particularly its passages on the Walking Dead. Certain similarities have also been noted with accounts of the Draugr in Norse legend and the Lamia of Roman antiquity, undead beings who persist in flesh or spirit long after death. The chapter closes with an ominous warning: the dead are not always silent, and the living should take care not to listen too closely. The flesh rots, but will alone may defy the grave. The unburied whisper, and those who listen shall not sleep. Chapter 5. The Forbidden Art of Necromancy. One of the most dangerous chapters, this section outlines the methods by which one might summon and speak with the dead. Frater Aurelius warns against such practices, claiming that true necromancy is not merely raising spirits but opening oneself to the whispers of the abyss. He explains that the art of necromancy involves more than reciting incantations or performing rituals. It is a delicate balance between life and death, one that can lead to irreversible consequences. Aurelius emphasizes that those who attempt to communicate with the dead often become channels for malevolent forces, their bodies and minds no longer their own. Aurelius describes the necessary steps for summoning, which are said to involve forbidden rites with specific timing and locations. However, he emphasizes that even the most seasoned practitioners of necromancy cannot predict the true cost of such rituals. Some become possessed by the spirits they summon, while others are driven mad by the knowledge gained. It is suggested that only the most desperate would seek to pierce the veil between life and death, for such practices are seen as the ultimate act of hubris. Certain scholars have drawn unsettling comparisons between this chapter and the practices mentioned in Timeline Secrets, particularly its infamous chapter, The Blasphemy of Averoigne, which describes necromantic rites of a heretical sect. The parallels between these texts suggest a shared understanding of the dangers involved in necromantic practices. Both texts describe not just communication with the dead, but the very act of inviting them into the world of the living, something that may open portals to other realms. Some readers have even suggested that the rituals outlined in both texts may be linked to an ancient and now forgotten order dedicated to the exploration of life beyond death. Frater Aurelius ends the chapter with a chilling warning. The art of necromancy, if mastered, can unlock vast realms of forbidden knowledge, but it comes at a price. The soul of the practitioner may be forfeit. To speak with the dead is to invite them to speak through you. Few hear them and remain unchanged. Chapter 6. The False Heaven and the Black Light. Perhaps the most heretical chapter of Arcana Mortis, this section challenges the conventional understanding of the afterlife and suggests that the traditional vision of heaven is an illusion. Frater Aurelius introduces the idea of a deceptive afterlife, where false divinities, beings not of light and grace but of malice and manipulation, ensnare the souls of the faithful. Aurelius argues that many who believe they are ascending to paradise are, in fact, being led astray into an eternal deception. He speaks of a place where souls are held captive, not by punishment, but by a subtle cosmic force that mimics the divine, in order to bind them to a never-ending cycle of false transcendence. This vision echoes certain Gnostic ideas, especially those that describe the demiurge, a false creator god that traps souls in a lower, illusionary reality. In a similar vein, Aurelius suggests that the false heaven is the creation of such dark forces which feed off the belief of those who are trapped within it. They promise peace and eternal light, but in truth they offer nothing but eternal stagnation. Souls, once they enter, are left unaware of their true fate, as they are lulled into a false sense of salvation. Some readers have drawn disturbing parallels between Aurelius's description of the false afterlife and the accounts found in the Necronomicon. In the forbidden texts, the great old ones are often portrayed as beings that masquerade as gods, promising knowledge, power, and salvation to those who serve them, only to reveal their true nature as malevolent cosmic entities. The text mentions that many who sought power from these beings were ultimately lost, their souls ensnared by their false promises. Similarly, Aurelius hints at the idea that the false heaven is just another part of a cosmic game, with the souls of the faithful caught between the tricks of ancient and incomprehensible forces. In his most startling proposition, Frater Aurelius suggests that the black light is not a symbol of evil in the traditional sense, but rather a manifestation of the true nature of the cosmos, a vast, unknowable expanse of being that hides behind the veil of conventional spirituality. He warns that to seek the light of the false heavens is to seek a distorted reflection of the true cosmos, and that this path leads only to cosmic imprisonment. The chapter is a meditation on the complexity of existence beyond life, suggesting that the souls of the dead may find themselves not in heaven or hell, but in an intricate and dangerous web of divine deception, where they are unknowingly pawns in a game played by forces far beyond their comprehension. Not all that shines is holy. Not all that beckons is salvation. Beware the light that has no warmth. Chapter 7. The Final Revelation. The final chapter of the Arcana Mortis is widely regarded as the most enigmatic and elusive, as it is said, to be written in a cipher that only a select few occult scholars have ever purported to decipher. This chapter delves into the ultimate question: what happens when the final veil of death is lifted? Frater Aurelius speaks of the moment when all is revealed, but paradoxically, it is a revelation that silences all voices and thoughts. In this final stage, the truth is not a grand cosmic answer or an understanding of divine purpose, but rather a stark, terrifying silence, a cessation of all things, a state beyond knowledge and beyond existence itself. This silence, according to Aurelius, is the ultimate truth, the state that is neither life nor death, neither light nor darkness, but a blank void where no consciousness can reside. The implications of this passage have prompted considerable debate among scholars of the occult. Some theorists argue that this truth represents a terrifying existential horror. Beyond death and beyond even the dominion of the old ones, there is only eternal oblivion, a state of being where all is erased, all is forgotten, and no force, divine or demonic, can hold sway. This bleak interpretation suggests that all that exists, including the gods themselves, is ultimately doomed to disappear into nothingness, unremembered and without meaning. Others, however, interpret this passage as a vision of transcendence, a final release from the chains of existence where the soul reaches a state of pure, untainted being, one that transcends the machinations of the cosmos, the old ones, and even the gods. In this interpretation, the silence is not an end, but a beginning, a return to a primordial, undifferentiated state where the individual soul merges with the eternal whole, free from suffering, from time, and from the constraints of reality itself. Regardless of the interpretation, this final chapter carries with it an inescapable sense of the unknown. It suggests that the ultimate truth of existence is something far beyond human comprehension, a truth that may not be comprehensible to the living or even the dead. When the final veil is lifted, the voices shall cease and the truth shall be silence. As for the fate of the Arcana Mortis, its existence has remained shrouded in secrecy. While the Church made extensive efforts to erase all traces of the book, seeking to suppress its heretical teachings, rumors have persisted for centuries. Whispers speak of hidden copies of the text, books that have vanished into private collections, buried deep within the vaults of forgotten libraries, or even hidden within the archives of secret societies. Some claim that these societies, possessing knowledge of the book's contents, continue to safeguard it, waiting for the right moment to reveal the ultimate truth contained within its cryptic pages. It is said that those few who have come into contact with the book in its entirety have been profoundly affected, with some driven to madness and others succumbing to an eerie and unnatural silence of their own. Whether the book's legacy is one of forbidden knowledge or insurmountable terror, one thing is certain: its teachings persist in the shadows, haunting those who dare to probe the mysteries of life, death, and what lies beyond.